Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Painting Faces. This is Cynics, and in this episode, I'm going to be painting this face way over here on the left. It's a pretty huge face. But you may notice the line art, the style I was kind of going for was kind of heavily inspired by an Ashley Wood style. So in that respect, I'm actually going to be trying to capture a very Ashley Wood-esque painting and coloring scheme to go with it. So, if you don't know who Ashley Wood is, he's a traditional painter who also does a lot of comic book work. But he's kind of well known for a very minimalist and impressionist style, as well as being well known for drawing a lot of cool kind of robots and girls and stuff. So, in the spirit of kind of capturing that traditional painterly look, I'm actually going to be painting completely above the line art with this one. So you may have noticed that as I'm painting, I'm kind of just slowly going over the line art and getting rid of it. And I tried to leave it in, when I started with my base tone and stuff, just so I could kind of know where the mouth and stuff is. So that's kind of, all those dark lines are the last things I'm painting over. But yeah, so that should help me capture that traditional painterly feel more so than painting under the line art. And the other thing I would say that's notable about Ashley Wood is I would say his painting schemes are generally very flat, like you'll see. Sometimes they'll be like a direct lighting source, but a lot of the times they'll have kind of a very neutral lighting source. And value-wise, the skin tone will be very flat in like specific areas, like the face. Won't have that many value changes. It won't be that 3D and round and realistic. It'll kind of be minimalistic and interesting. So, while I am putting a lot of different colors in here, like you can see those kind of orangish and reddish tones, if this was in black and white, it would actually be fairly flat. You wouldn't see those cheek colors and the nose colors and any of that stuff. It would just kind of be a flat gray. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for with this face overall, is that Ashley Wood painterly style. So it should be a lot of fun. And I'm kind of doing a lot of tricks. Like he likes to do a really strong blush on the cheeks and stuff like that, or more like on the cheekbones. So I brought in a lot of orangish tones to really make a really dark, just really makeup-y look on those cheekbones. And on the nose and stuff as well, and stuff like that. So, I'm going to actually take some time to answer some of the questions I've got in the previous video, because that's kind of a fun thing to do while I'm commentating these videos in my after post commentary way, is to look at some of the comments that are posted and actually go over them, talk about them, stuff like that. So, let's see, we have one comment from someone who didn't like the lighting in the last video very much. And I could sympathize with that because it's kind of a weird lighting scheme and I didn't sell it probably as well as I could have. But it might also demonstrate a greater problem which I'll have with the overall composition of this collage of faces, and that it breaks a couple of the rules you generally want to stick by when you're doing anything, which is one, that you have a consistent style, and obviously these faces all kind of have a slightly different style, so it doesn't make them mesh that well with each other. Um, but the other thing is that there's no consistent lighting source either, so that might be jarring on the eyes too, because each of these faces is kind of handled independently, and there's no consistent light source to kind of meld them all together, so that might be kind of awkward on the eye. And we'll see how bad it is when everything's all said and done and I have a finished little collage tutorial thing. But anyway, you may notice in the painting right here that I'm kind of flickering off and on the painting layer. And that's just to look at the line art, because a lot of times if you paint strictly above the line art, you'll find that you lose a lot of the personality that was in the line work itself. Because usually in your lines, since they're so simple and you generally just have some lines here and there, that there's a lot of personality in each of those strokes. And a lot of times you'll lose like so much personality when you just paint things over, and it's hard to get a lot of personality in painting. But anyway, let me get back to the comments and questions for a bit. There was a question asked by Howie, and that was basically how I learned to paint faces without reference. and if I used reference much and stuff like that. Basically, I don't use reference as much as I should have, and it's kind of weird because I'm actually terrible at painting from reference. You would think that if you can paint from your mind that you'd probably be able to paint from reference, but I'm kind of terrible just because I haven't practiced it as much as I should. And it kind of shows sometimes because my colors aren't as good as they could be, and kind of my photorealism kind of skills aren't that great, and stuff like that. So it's definitely an aspect of my art that I need to work on the most. Just doing stuff from photo reference. But I kind of learned just by taking that monkey at a typewriter approach and just doing it wrong until something good finally came out. I basically filled sketchbooks and with just pages full of faces because that was kind of my go-to thing that I would draw when I didn't know what to draw or I had artist block or whatever you want to call it. I'd just be like, okay, well, I'll just draw some faces and boring faces, same faces over and over again, stuff like that. Eventually, you just get used to the proportions and your eye kind of gets adjusted to know when things are right and when they're wrong and stuff like that. And anyway, I also noticed in your comment that you're doing 100 faces in 100 days kind of painting thing, and so I'll post a link to that in this video right here so people can check it out and give you their feedback and whatnot. And I would actually say your painting from reference is very good. It's probably better than mine. But yeah, you have a good brush economy and stuff like that, and basically your reference painting look really good. Your painting your painting without reference is kind of a weak spot, I can see. Basically, from the two that you have up there, I would notice that kind of you're making your foreheads kind of small. Some of your facial features are big, and the chins are small on both of them, and they both kind of have a vacant look that definitely isn't in your reference pieces, where there's a lot more life to the faces and expressions and whatnot. But that's just something you keep doing until you get better, and as long as you can identify the things that aren't perfect about it, then you can improve it, and that's the most important thing, is being able to identify what's wrong with something. But anyway, back to the painting, you can see I kind of filled in a little bit of pink around the chin area, and that's kind of an interesting thing because obviously it's kind of a good way to bring in some color into the bottom of the face, especially on female faces where you don't have that stubble and you can't bring in those desaturated tones to kind of break up the face, because obviously it's a girl and hopefully she doesn't have too much facial hair. But bringing in some pink like on the chin and stuff, that kind of makes it a lot more interesting, keeps it from being just boring and flat altogether. So I added a little collar around her neck too and stuff like that, and I'm kind of just finishing up around this part, kind of putting in some flyaway hair and adding little details where I can and doing all of my kind of experimental things, and like what can I add to kind of spice it up and bring some extra life to it. But I would say the face itself, the skin tones are pretty much done. I'm happy enough with the way the nose looks and the lip area and whatnot. And you may notice for the lip, I basically used two very flat colors. There's like one flat color for the top lip, one flat color for the bottom lip. I brought in a little highlight on the end and stuff on the bottom lip, but mainly I'm trying to stick to flat colors just to keep that Ashley Wood style. So once again, I'm pretty much done at this moment, and I'm just going through and flickering off and on to make sure I captured the style, and finally here we go. I color corrected a bit, but color correcting doesn't matter that much. I just changed it a little bit because I wanted there to be less redness in the hair and kind of just give it a slightly different tone. But both tones, both this one and what I had done previously, I would say they were both kind of fitting in Ashley Wood style. He sometimes does very orangish, kind of more warm tones, and he sometimes does these like desaturated, more lifeless tones. So they both kind of work. I just went with this one to kind of break up the orangeness of everything else on the page and whatnot, but I might even change it a bit again. But you can see in this close-up that I tried to stick with really thick and blocky brush strokes, and that's to keep that minimalist impressionist style. That's another thing that I can recommend. Always try to work with a big brush. Small brushes are like the last thing you want to do. You want to make sure everything can be handled by a bigger brush, and then you want to work from big brush to small brush as you go along. Or you can just leave it at all big brushes, and that's kind of the minimalist style. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and that's all.